The late autumn air was still as the black SUV rolled to a stop outside their suburban home. Sarah had barely stepped out when the flashing red lights cut through the driveway. "Ma'am, you're trespassing." The HOA enforcer barked, his hand twitching over the holster. She froze for a heartbeat, her military duffel still slung over her shoulder. 13 months in a war zone, and this was her welcome home? The man's hand went for his gun. He had no idea who he was dealing with, because the woman he just threatened wasn't just a resident. She was special operations, trained to survive ambushes far deadlier than this. And tonight, she wasn't about to be bullied. The engine ticked as it cooled, the driveway lit only by the glow of the SUV's taillights. Sarah adjusted the weight of the duffel on her shoulder, feeling the familiar ache where the strap dug into her uniform jacket. The suburban cul-de-sac was quiet. Too quiet for a homecoming. No welcome sign. No warm porch light. Just a cold November wind that rustled the oak leaves at her feet. She had been gone 13 months, flying halfway across the world in the dead of night to get here, to finally come home. Then came the flash of red and blue. Not a police cruiser. Wrong paint job, wrong decals, but close enough to make her stomach knot. The vehicle screeched to a stop behind her SUV. 2 men stepped out wearing black jackets with HOA enforcement stitched on the chest, one older with a radio clipped to his shoulder, the other younger, his hand already resting on his hip where the holster sat. "Ma'am," the older one barked, voice sharp and loud like a drill sergeant. "This property is under community violation. You can't be here." Sarah blinked, confused. "Excuse me. You heard me. You're trespassing. This home is under lien by the HOA. Your vehicle isn't registered. You need to step away from the property now." She let out a small laugh, half disbelieving, half bitter. "This is my house. My husband lives here. We paid every fee on time." The younger officer stepped closer, boots crunching on the gravel. "Name," he demanded. "Sarah Miller." He tapped something on his tablet, frowned, then looked up with a smirk. "No Sarah Miller on record. We've had enough squatters trying to get in since the notice went up." Her brow furrowed. "Notice? What notice?" Her voice stayed calm, though a flicker of heat stirred in her chest. "Don't play dumb," the older one snapped. "You're not authorized to be here. Step away from the door." Behind the curtains, a light flicked on. A familiar silhouette moved. David. Her husband. Relief flickered in her chest. He must have been asleep, waiting up for her. The door cracked open just as the younger officer's hand went to his weapon. "Sir, stay inside," he barked. "We have an intruder." David's voice, hoarse from sleep. "What the hell are you doing?" "That's my wife." But the younger man didn't hear him, or didn't want to. He drew his sidearm with a practiced flick, the muzzle catching the porch light. Sarah's muscles tightened on instinct. Her eyes locked on the barrel aimed squarely at her chest. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered, voice breaking slightly. She raised her hands slowly, palms out, the duffel sliding off her shoulder with a dull thud on the driveway. Her mind raced, not in panic, but in calculation. Distance to cover, 8 feet. His stance. Shaky, weight on his heels. Triggered, discipline. Poor. Safety, off. This wasn't a cop. This was a scared, overconfident man with authority stitched on his jacket. "Put the gun down," she said evenly, her voice low but carrying enough steel to make the older one glance at her twice. "You're pointing a weapon at a decorated service member on her own property." "Don't move," he shouted, louder now, finger twitching near the trigger. The older man muttered something into his radio. "Back up," she guessed. "Great. More of them." The door swung open fully. David stepping out in his socks, hands raised in a pleading gesture. "Stop. This is her house. You've made a mistake." "Sir, step back," the young one yelled again, his eyes darting between the two of them. Sweat trickled down his temple despite the chill. Sarah's breath came slow and controlled. She remembered the convoy ambush outside Kabul, the panicked soldier with his rifle shaking the same way. She remembered the rule, de-escalate or move first. "Listen to me carefully," she said, her voice soft now, like she was speaking to a cornered animal. "I've spent over a year protecting people like you. Don't make me regret it. The older officer stiffened. You threatening an HOA officer, ma'am? Her gaze didn't leave the barrel. I'm promising you a choice. David moved between them, his hand outstretched, voice cracking with anger. Enough! This is illegal. You can't just draw a gun on my wife. She just got home from deployment. For a moment, the street seemed to hold its breath. A car passed at the far end of the cul-de-sac, headlights sweeping briefly over the tense tableau. The younger officer licked his lips, his hands trembling now. Orders are orders, he muttered, almost to himself. Whose orders? Sarah asked. The older one glanced at the tablet. Board directive. Properties flagged for seizure. Says here your spouse failed to comply with new vehicle restrictions. David's face flushed red. Because I didn't pay your illegal parking fines? This is insane. The young man's grip faltered. Sarah saw the window, tiny but enough. With a swift motion, she stepped sideways, her boot catching the duffel strap and flipping up between them as a barrier. The sudden movement startled him. His shot went wide, cracking into the driveway with a puff of shattered stone. David shouted. The older man cursed. And Sarah moved. Training took over. Her hand clamped his wrist, twisting the weapon down and out before his mind caught up. One pivot, one controlled pull, and the gun clattered to pavement. Her other hand shoved him back, his body sprawling against the cold hood of his SUV. Gun secure, she barked, kicking it aside. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed level. The older one raised his hands halfway, eyes wide now. Ma'am, Sarah, stand down. No one wants trouble. You brought trouble, she shot back. You pointed a gun at a soldier on her doorstep. David's voice was sharp, furious. Call the police. Real police. Not this fake HOA nonsense. The younger officer scrambled to his feet, face flushed with humiliation, eyes burning with a mix of fear and anger. You assaulted an officer. This is a federal offense. Sarah stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. Try writing that report, she said coldly. Explain how you drew a weapon on a homeowner without cause. The night was thick with silence now, the kind that comes before a storm. Lights flicked on in neighboring houses. Curtains twitched. Somewhere, a dog barked. David grabbed her hand, squeezing it tight. Let's go inside, he whispered. But Sarah's eyes stayed on the two men, memorizing their faces, their names stitched on their jackets. Carter. Lyle, this isn't over, the older one muttered finally, voice low. You'll hear from the board. Sarah picked up her duffel, the weight familiar, grounding. Tell the board, she said, her voice ablaze in the cold air. They picked the wrong house. The SUV's engine growled as they backed away, taillights fading into the dark. Only then did Sarah let her shoulders drop, the adrenaline seeping out like a slow leak. David closed the door behind them, his hand shaking as he locked it twice. She leaned against the wall, eyes shut for a moment, letting the warmth of home sink in. 13 months gone, and this was her welcome. A barrel in her face, a threat on her doorstep. David, she murmured finally, opening her eyes. What the hell happened while I was gone? David rubbed his temples as he sat on the edge of the couch, a stack of unopened letters spread across the coffee table. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each second stretching the tension in the room. Sarah stood by the window, her arms crossed, watching the cul-de-sac where the HOA's SUV had vanished. The adrenaline still hummed in her veins, making it hard to stay still. They started a few months after you left. David said finally, voice tight. New board got elected. They changed the rules overnight. Fees, vehicle permits, landscaping fines. I tried to fight it, but they threatened liens, then started sending violation notices every week. It got out of hand. Sarah turned, her eyes narrowing. And you didn't tell me? I didn't want to burden you while you were over there, he said, meeting her gaze with a weary look. I thought I could handle it. She exhaled slowly, forcing her shoulders to loosen. They pointed a gun at me. David, this isn't just about grass height or parking stickers. This is power gone rotten. He nodded, his hands clenching the edge of his knees. They've been doing it to others, too. Old Mrs. Hargrove down the street had her fence torn down. The Thompsons had their car towed 3 times. Everyone's scared. They've got a private security contract now. Act like cops, but they're not. Sarah's jaw set. Tonight was a warning. They wanted to show control. David looked at her carefully, almost fearful of the glint in her eyes. What are you thinking? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she went to her duffel, unzipped it, and pulled out a worn leather notebook, her operations log. She flipped to a blank page and began to write names. Carter, Lyle, board directive, private security contract. I'm thinking they picked the wrong woman to intimidate, she said finally. The next morning, the sun rose over a 10th Street. HOA notices fluttered on a few doors like unwanted flags. Sarah, now in jeans and a sweatshirt, walked the block with a quiet, measured step. Neighbors peeked out, some curious, some fearful. She stopped by Mrs. Hargrove's porch, introduced herself, listened. Then the Thompsons. A pattern emerged. Excessive fines, threats of foreclosure, intimidation under guise of community improvement. By the time she returned home, her notebook was full. David met her at the door. You're not going to do anything rash, are you? She gave him a faint smile. No, I'm going to do something smart. That evening, when the HOA called an emergency board meeting in their small clubhouse at the end of the cul-de-sac, Sarah was already there, sitting quietly in the back, hood up, hands clasped. The room smelled of coffee and printed paper. The board members, 5 of them, all in pressed shirts and smug expressions, barely glanced her way. Carter and Lyle stood near the front, whispering something to the chairman. Their eyes flicked to her and then away, quickly. The chairman cleared his throat. We have reports of a violent altercation last night involving a so-called resident. This is unacceptable. We must enforce our standards. Sarah stood. The room stilled. Heads turned. Her voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. You mean the night your hired gun pointed a weapon at a homeowner without cause? The chairman's face reddened. Ma'am, this is a private meeting. I live here, she said calmly, and I have every right to be here. Lyle stepped forward, puffing himself up. You assaulted an officer. No, she said, her gaze locking on his. I disarmed a reckless man before he hurt someone. The chairman slammed his hand on the table. Enough. This board operates under community bylaws. You're in violation. Sarah pulled a small folder from her bag and tossed it onto the table. Inside were copies of the new bylaws, annotated in red, with state statutes circled. These bylaws violate 3 state property codes and 2 federal housing regulations, she said. You've been extorting your own residents. A ripple went through the room. One of the older board members, a woman with silver hair, frowned and picked up the papers. Is this true? She murmured. Carter barked a laugh. What? You're going to take us to court. These things take months. By then, liens are filed, fees collected. By then, Sarah cut in, her voice low, you'll be answering to more than a court. She stepped forward, her presence filling the cramped room. I've served overseas, in places where law is a luxury. I've seen what happens when men like you think they're untouchable. But here, this is my home. My neighbors deserve better. The silver-haired board member cleared her throat. I motion we pause all enforcement actions until we review these claims. The chairman scowled. Motion denied. Sarah smiled faintly. That's okay. I already called the State Housing Commission this morning. And the local news. They're very interested in your private security pointing firearms at residents. Carter's face drained of color. You what? Everything's documented, she said. Body cam footage from your own men, witness statements from 3 households, and a little thing called the Second Amendment. You brought a weapon to intimidate. You'll answer for it. The room erupted. Some shouting, some whispering, some standing in shock. The chairman tried to restore order, but the tide was turning. Residents were murmuring now, their voices rising with kind of quiet anger Sarah recognized well. The moment a community stops being afraid. She left the folder on the table and walked out, the cold night air greeting her like an ally. By the following week, letters arrived, this time not from the HOA, but from the county inspector's office. The board was under investigation. Carter and Lyle's security contracts were suspended pending inquiry. Neighbors began to gather, talking in the open for the first time in months. Sarah kept her head down. Mostly, she raked leaves with David, fixed a squeaky porch step, nodded to the mailman. But when Mrs. Hargrove brought over a pie and whispered, "Thank you, dear," she only smiled. One rainy evening, a knock came at the door. Carter stood there, hat in hand, no jacket, no gun. The bluster was gone. He cleared his throat, wanted to apologize. Things got out of hand. Sarah studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You're lucky," she said softly. "Where I just came from, men who draw guns without thinking don't get second chances." He nodded, eyes down. "I get it now." As he walked away, David wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "So that's it for now," she said. "They'll replace the board, rewrite the rules. Maybe this street can breathe again." He kissed her temple. "You didn't just come home, Sarah. You came back fighting." She looked out at the wet pavement, the streetlights reflecting in puddles like distant stars. "I didn't fight," she murmured. "I reminded them what it means to stand your ground." The wind rustled the leaves, carrying with a promise. This neighborhood would not forget what happened here, nor the woman who came home to defend it. Not with fists, but with resolve sharper than any blade. If that story gripped you, imagine how many more are waiting to be told. Don't miss out. Hit that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a good twist. And subscribe to Q&Q Stories for more powerful, edge-of-your-seat tales. Your support helps us bring you the next big one.